yung account ko naka-login but I'm not gonna listen. Yeah.
Sige.
Bye-bye for
Okay, bye-bye.
now.
Ayan, okay, nag-record na siya. And mukhang live na rin siya on YouTube. All right. So, this is our first lecture, I believe, for EM 149. And so for Minerals Industry Visit and Assessment. So, syempre, bago tayo makapunta sa field or bago tayo makavisit dun sa mga minahan, we have to have a sort of safety briefing. So, typically, the safety briefing, this orientation, would also be given by the respective mines. Kasi syempre, kung may mga visitors, they have to make sure that that everyone is safe and sound. So I'm just going to discuss what would generally be discussed din sa inyo. So it's as if magkakaroon talaga tayo ng deployment in the field. Ayan. So ako ay mag-off ng video because my internet is very slow today. Ayan. So let's begin. And hopefully, gising na kayo lahat kahit anong oras na ba? Kahit mag to 2:30 na. I think 2:11 pa lang pala. All right. So, yan. For those who just came in and also for those who were here earlier din pala, you think I think you're able to see na may breakout rooms tayo. So we're actually going to be having a short activity later, wherein we're going to be grouped into surface, underground, and quarry mining method. So whichever group you are in or whichever mining method you are under, later I'll instruct you to join the breakout room. So ano naman to, short activity. It's going to be a quick exercise. Okay? Sige. So we are going to be discussing today hazard identification, risk assessment and control, or otherwise known as HIRAC, okay, HIRAC, and some health and safety hazards in mining operations. So of course, we're not really going to be covering every single detail of this, but just some general reminders, okay, in case you're able to get deployed or magkakaroon kayo ng visit. So to begin, ayan, dito tayo sa health and safety hazards in mining operations. Okay, so familiar naman na tayo sa basic unit operations, di ba? Could we just have a quick refresher what the basic unit operations are? Ayan, you could choose to unmute or pwede nyong i-type lang din sa chat. And so hopefully you still know this. Okay, so first, yung first na step natin, we have yung fragmentation, okay? Yung drilling, blasting, loading, and hauling. Okay, so those are our basic unit operations, di ba? So, when we are talking about yung health and safety hazard, syempre kailangan natin intindihin kung paano talaga nangyayari yung bawat unit operation. Okay, before we are able to identify kung ano yung mga hazards. So this would be actually quite specific doon sa site, okay, doon sa operation. If you will think about it, diba? Drilling and blasting in surface mining is very different from drilling and blasting in underground mining. So we're going to identify, or eventually you will be identifying different sources, okay, of these safety hazards. And so I think you could sort of imagine this by now, okay, because you're already familiar with the different mining methods and kung paano yung system ng bawat isa. Okay, so let's start with yung HIRAC. Okay, again, this is hazard identification, risk assessment, and control. Okay, so to begin, let us first define or differentiate kung ano ang hazard versus risk. All right. So again, I'd like you to participate in the chat. Okay. So you look at this cartoon and try to ask yourself, in this cartoon, what are the hazards? Sige. So if you can just think of anything, you can put it in the chat. What do you think are the hazards here that you can see in this cartoon? Okay, so that's correct. One hazard is the erupting volcano. Sige, ano pa ba? Okay, yung mga fumes, yung mga gases. Okay, that's correct. Okay, the lava, that's correct. Okay? Yes. So, tama naman yung mga yung idea ninyo of what a hazard is. So, those are the hazards, but how can the parachutist minimize their risk from these hazards? So, kahit even just a simple freeze or simple example. Yeah, so that's correct. Do not get too close to the volcano. So, the parachutist can also avoid the volcano itself. Pwedeng hindi na siya tumalon doon, okay? Or just go a completely different route. All right. So I think at this point, you kind of have an idea kung ano yung difference ng dalawang terms na ito. Okay, so let's get into yung mismong definition niya. First, a hazard is anything that has the potential to cause harm. Okay? This could be any condition, situation, practice, behavior, etc., including including injury, disease, death, environmental property, and equipment damage. So this is where the harm could possibly be directed at. So ito yung mga pwedeng mga results, okay, ng mga ng pag-expose sa mga hazards na ito. Okay? So it can be any condition, situation, practice, behavior, or etc. Okay? So what about yung risk? So now that we've identified what a hazard is, yung risk naman is the likelihood and cost of a hazard happening to your property. So sa risk, meron tayong mga factors na kailangan tignan, okay? For example, an example of cost is human life, okay? An example would be damage to property and infrastructure. And then we would also be looking at the probability of this happening, okay? Of this happening to you or your property. So dependent siya very much on location. And large events are generally less likely than small ones. Okay? So again, going back, hazard is something that has the potential to cause the harm, and the risk is the likelihood and cost of a hazard happening to you or your property. So we're going to be getting into itong likelihood and cost in a few slides. And actually, our activity for today is going to be related to this. Okay? So let's give an example. All right. So we have here a breathalyzer. Okay, so familiar ba kayo sa breathalyzer? So this is a certain equipment kung saan mag-exhale yung isang specific isang person, so they would be able to know kung ano yung kung nakainom ba sila ng alcohol. Okay, so it's an indicator of that. And within this breathalyzer, meron tayong ginagamit na potassium dichromate to be able to determine yung presence or yung alcohol, okay, doon sa person na yon. So itong potassium dichromate, if you are exposed to it in large amounts, it's actually a carcinogen. So toxic siya, and we would like to avoid it in large concentrations. Pero since maliit lang naman yung kanyang concentration, there is a very low risk of someone being affected by that particular carcinogen. Okay, so in itself, you can see that if you adjust certain parameters dito sa situation na ito, we would get very different results. So ayun, basically small in this if it is included in this particular equipment, okay, so hindi naman natin in-expose directly yung mga tao doon, okay? The risk of anything, of any adverse effect would be quite low, diba? But the hazard is there. The hazard is still there because this is a carcinogen. Okay? Yan. So next, let us look at FLAR, diba? So dito sa FLAR, let's say you have a baker who deals with, of course, flour every day para gumawa ng pastries, para gumawa ng bread, ganon. So, what do you think? What do you guys think would be yung hazard dito? Yan. So that's correct. It's the dust. It's the flour dust. So, if you think of it, siguro kung kayo you are a casual baker, siguro, the frequency of your exposure to the flour dust isn't that well isn't that often, 'di ba? Because you just deal with it for a certain period of time. Pero kung yung mga bakers, for example, they deal with it every day during their working hours. So even if the flour in itself is non-toxic, they are exposed to it day by day. So pwede nilang ma-inhale yun. These can, especially um, if the if the particle sizes are really really small, really minuscule, pwede silang mag-settle doon sa lang. So these can be inhaled, pwede silang mag-settle eventually doon sa alveoli, and eventually it could cause respiratory disease, di ba? So you can see the difference between the two examples. So here we have we have a some compound that is essentially carcinogenic, and then we have something na non-toxic. So parang nuisance dust lang siya. Ganon. Okay? But the frequency or the risk rather is different if you compare this one in a breathalyzer and this particular example with the baker, diba? So it's not necessarily just because non-toxic yung compound or if this certain practice isn't that dangerous, but if there are other factors that would amplify yung risk, mas tataas yung kanyang priority compared dun sa iba. Okay? So in relation to this, ayun, with the activity that we'll be having later, mas makita ninyo visually kung paano siya nangyayari. Okay? All right. So now that we are here in HIRAC, let's start with the HI, okay, the hazard identification. So itong hazard identification, this is the process of examining each work area and work task for the purpose of identifying all hazards which are inherent in the job. Okay, so this is very important, especially when we are dealing with mining operations, because you know that it's a very dangerous environment. So kahit gaano maybe you would think that this isn't going to be much of a problem. This is just very, hindi ko maisip yung term. Basta hindi siya, kung isipin niyo yung certain situations, these may not be that important, okay? Pero kung andun sila, you have to include it right away doon sa hazard identification ninyo. The process of hazard identification is about finding out which area of the work or task could cause harm, even if it seems quite insignificant. Ayan, yan yung hinahanap kong term. Okay, so I have an example here. This one is siguro a landslide and flood susceptibility map, okay, of a certain area in Cebu. Ayan, so nag-identify sila ng areas that are susceptible to landslides and floods. Okay, so we are done with HI. Okay, let's move on to yung risk assessment or yung RA. So yung risk assessment is the process of evaluating the risks associated with each of the hazards identified so that the true nature of the risk can be understood. Okay, so once na ma-identify natin yung mga pwedeng mag-cause ng harm, we identify kung ano yung severity, okay, of the harm and the likelihood of its occurring. Okay, so sa risk assessment, we look at three things. Sorry, hindi ko na-include yung first one I was talking earlier. We would look at the nature of the harm, okay, the severity of the harm, and the likelihood of its occurring. So I'm going to be showing you a formula later, okay, for risk, but just keep in mind na itong likelihood, this one would be equivalent to L, and then itong severity, this one would be C. Okay, so just keep that in mind. I'll be showing this again in a few slides. All right, so let's move on to the last part of HIRAC, which is the control or the risk control. So basically, yung nangyayari dito ay we take action to eliminate the health and safety risks so far as is reasonably practicable. Well, I think itong HIRAC, this is something that you are already familiar with, di ba? Kasi nagkaroon kayo ng discussion na ganito sa 1-to-1. Am I correct? Or baka hindi yun na siya maalala. Tama, di ba? Ayun, yan. So it's good that you already know this. Okay? So mukhang madali na lang para sa atin ang activity later. I think you've done a similar activity. Ayun. But anyway, sige, let's continue. So when risks cannot be eliminated, the implementation of control measures is required to minimize the risks. And we also develop a hierarchy of controls. So yan yung sa C, okay, na step natin. So basically, we are finished with whatever is enumerated in yung HIRAC. But we actually have this step that comes after the risk control. So once mag-identify ka ng hazards, you assess it, and then you control the risk already, what do you think comes next? Okay? Sige, try to jog your memory a little bit. What comes next after controlling the risk? And so isipin na lang natin na itong HIRAC, this isn't something, this is actually a cycle. Okay, so that's correct. Yung next na step natin is monitoring. Okay? So hindi siya nakalagay dito sa, what do you call this, dun sa acronym. Pero very important itong monitoring and review. So this involves ongoing monitoring of the hazards identified, risks assessed, and risk control processes recommended or utilized. So we of course have to monitor and review to see if they are working effectively. Yes, so that's correct. Assessment of effectiveness of control. Kasi what if yung control nyo pala ay mababa pala yung kanyang effectivity, di ba? So you're going to have to go back to the drawing board. So this is a cycle. Hindi lang siya isang series of steps, and it won't just end there. Okay? Ayan. So basically, summary, identify hazards, assess risks, control risks, and review control measures. Okay? Sige. So, at this point, may questions ba kayo? So if you think that you still remember this from 1-to-1, can you give a thumbs up? Yan. Okay. Sige. Thank you for the feedback. All right. So ngayon, mapupunta na tayo dito sa risk rating matrix. So this is something that you already know as well. Okay? Di ba meron akong sinabi kanina to take note of yung L tsaka yung C. Okay? So L here, ito yung likelihood, and then we have C, the consequences, or yung severity nung outcome. So basically, just to refresh your memory, di ba, meron tayong multiplication na nangyayari dito. So likelihood, for example, we have rare is 1, unlikely is 2, possible is 3, likely is 4, and then certain kunyari is 5. Tapos dito rin sa consequences, habang palala yung situation, ayan, pataas din yung number. Okay? Ayan siya. So what happens here is that you just multiply, okay? And ito 5, ayun, sorry naka-mouse lang ako. Ito 10, 15, 20, and then 25. Ayan. And then meron tayong mga certain ranges wherein we would classify them as very low, low, moderate, high, and then critical. And so of course, kung alin yung mga critical, yan yung very important talaga na i-address. Okay? But of course, we would more or less have to go across the board. Okay. And now this is actually where our activity comes in. So let me just stop. Yes, the PowerPoint is going to be posted. I'm going to send, let me just upload a file. I'm going to upload a file. How do I do this? Wait lang ah. Wait. Huh. Okay. It's here. Ayan. So, are you able to see yung naka-upload? Kita nyo ba? Ayun. Sige. So, what we're going to do is this. Let me share my screen again. Yan. So, short activity lang to. And since you've already experienced something similar in one-to-one, I think this would be yun, a bit more easier for you. Okay. So, kita niyo yung breakout rooms, di ba? So, you know your group, kaya na lang mag-assign ng mga sarili ninyo. And then what you would do is that you list 2 hazardous and 1 less hazardous activity, equipment, or event that may occur in the production area of your assigned mining method. So, and nasa, yung sinend ko, andun naman yung template, okay? Andun din itong what do you call this? Matrix na ito, okay? So you could use it for your reference. And then, ayun, maglist lang kayo ng tatlo, okay? And then, yun, just a simple activity so that we could identify some of the risks. Sige. So, for the activity, my questions pa ay, afterwards, I would be asking each group to present really quickly. Yan. So, kahit isang tao or pwedeng two people per mining method yung mag-present. So, ayan. So, explain nyo lang kung ano yung mga pinili ninyong activities, events, or whichever. Sige. So, before we begin, may questions ba kayo? Sige. So, if you are ready to begin with the activity, you can already assign yourselves doon sa breakout rooms. And so let me know kung hindi niyo ma-assign mga sarili niyo. Okay. So, maybe I'll give you 15 minutes. Sige, 10 minutes muna and then I'll ask you kung kamusta kayo.
Ma'am,
Yes.
pwede pong pa-enable ng
Screen
screen share.
share. Ayan, okay na. Can you try?
Sige po. Wait lang ma'am, balik ako sa group ko. Naka-phone lang po kasi ako. Thank you po.
Okay.
Ma'am Cheska, for surface mine po, ang magpipresent si Neil at saka si Kyle.
Sige.
Tama naman po, ma'am, no? So, isang output lang kami kahit dalawang group kaming pinagsama.
Yes. Isa lang
Okay
kayo.
Thank you po.
Okay, sige. Sila, yung quarry na lang. Hihintay natin. Sinong gustong mauna sa inyo? Meron ba?
Go, Neil!
Ma'am, surface na po yung mauna. May presenters na sila eh.
Kayo, nag-uusap pa. Sige. Sige, surface na lang muna, tas underground, tas quarry na lang yung last. Sige, hintayin na lang natin sila. Yan, mukhang nakabalik na sila. Okay. Sige, so I think the first ones who will be presenting ay yung surface. Yan. So, let me know kung kaya nyong mag-share ng screen.
Wait lang po.
Sige.
Hello po.
Yes.
Tapos,
Hello. Hello po. Okay na po.
Ayan. Okay.
wow.
Wala, hindi ko nalagay yung panghuli, Neil. Sa'yo na lang yun. Sorry.
Okay.
Nakikita na po ba?
Yes, kita
Yup.
naman.
Ayan. Wait lang po. Yung explanation. Ayan po. So, sa surface mining po, yung una po naming activity na nailagay is load and haul activity. And yung ano ba yun? Ayan, yung hazards po na pag na-input po namin is equipment collision and fall over edges. So sa equipment collision po, naglagay po kami ng likelihood na 5 and the risk is 20. So ano po ba yung magiging effect niya kung sakali? So yung equipment collisions may may cause property damage or it can be injury or death naman po. So paano po ba namin ito mapipigilan or what are the controls na pwede namin communication pa. Ano po ba yung mga control na pwede natin gawin? Positive communication, so yung communications between operation and then adequate lighting. So lighting din po, pwede po siyang mag-cause ng visibility issues na kung saan pwede po siyang mag-result banggaan ng mga kotse or ay ng mga trucks. And then maintain minimum clearance between equipment. So yung spacings and gaps din po nila dapat nagkakaroon pa rin po ng constant gaps para hindi po sila mag-result into equipment collisions. And then sunod naman po na hazard ay yung fall over edges. Same pa rin po with equipment collisions, nasa high risk din po siya. Likelihood is 4, severity is 5, so the risk is 20. So ano po ba yung effect niya? Yung pinaka-less na maaari po mangyari are injuries and ang pinaka-worst naman po is death. So ano po ba yung risk control na pwedeng gawin na pwedeng gawin? It's adequate windrows along crest lines, and then kailangan din pong maintain and inspect yung mga equipment na dapat na dapat ano pa rin po sa safety standards, and then pay special attention, provide safety seminars. Yung dalawa pong ito is more on focus dun po sa mga tao na dapat alert po sila sa work and they are well educated sa mga pwedeng mangyari. And go, Neil.
Okay. Share ko na lang yung screen. Wait. Ayun. So, yung table, third dust, yung hazard, nangyari naman siya sa entire mine operation. So, ayun. Effect niya is respiratory disease and damage to property. Kasi pwede damage to property because, for example, dusty siya, so mag-cause din siya na visibility problem. So, may increase yung likelihood ng collision, ganun. Tapos likelihood niya 5, severity is 3, risk is 15. So, yung risk control for this is proper use of PPE, dewatering, mga ground controls para ma-lessen yung amount ng dust. So, yun lang po.
Okay, sige. So, thank you very much sa Surface Mining Group. Very important yung lahat ng mga minention niyo. So, you had equipment collision, you had yung dust. Okay, so actually, I don't know if I've shared this with you guys before, pero yung undergrad thesis ko actually was on dust control. Sa tingin ko na-mention ko siya in passing before. But this is something that is quite an annoying issue na hindi pa rin siguro yung isa sa mga measures for this would be yung paggamit ng mga water trucks, for example, sa mga surface mines. So, so this is, si Kyle ba yung nag-suggest nun? But anyway, so this is something that is quite a nuisance sa mga surface mines especially. So siguro something to look forward to. We're going to be discussing more about this pagdating sa EM 162. So that is mine ventilation and air conditioning. And ayun, important yung mga minention nyo about equipment. So if you will notice, doon sa mga nilist nilang mga risk controls, there are different kinds, di ba? So merong mga, what do you call this? Merong mga directed towards yung mismong environment, di ba? Merong mga directed towards yung mga people. So we're going to also be discussing these types of controls in a bit. Ayan. So thank you very much sa surface mining group. And so next, we can have the underground mining group.
Kita po ba? Hello.
Yes, Kita.
Yeah, kita. So, hi, good afternoon. We are from the underground group. So, first activity, we listed blasting and nag-include kami ng 3 hazards dito sa blasting activity. So first, for the hazard, rock failure. Tapos nilist namin yung effect na mine collapse. And then yung likelihood niya ay 2. Tapos yung severity niya ay 5. Tapos yung risk niya ay 10. Tapos yung in-identify namin na pwedeng i-implement sa risk control ay kailangan yung ground control para malesen yung effect ng hazard na rock failure. Tapos next ay, of course, sa blasting, hindi maiiwasan yung harmful gases and dust, especially na nandito tayo sa underground setting. So yung likely na effect nito ay respiratory problems, especially dun sa mga personnel na nandun mismo sa site. And then yung likelihood niya, 4, yung severity niya ay 3, tsaka yung risk niya ay 12. Tapos yung risk control na in-identify namin na pwede i-implement dito ay yung ng proper ventilation sa underground mine, tsaka yung dust control. Tapos yung next ay hazard na explosion. Tapos yung likely na effect nito ay injury, tapos worst ay death. Tsaka yung likelihood ay 3, yung severity niya ay 5, tsaka yung risk niya ay 15. Yung risk control naman dito na pwedeng i-implement ay yung ground control and proper supervision. Ayun, next po.
Yung ito pong LHDs, yung sa ano naman, yung 1 less hazardous. So ang hazard niya is yun, equipment failure ng isang equipment natin. At yung pwede niyang effect ay magkaroon ng mga delays sa operation. At yung likelihood niya, ginawa namin 3, moderate, possible. Kasi severity, since parang wala naman siguro mangyaring masyadong catastrophic in terms of safety, ganun. Kaya 1 na lang, insignificant. Sas yung total risk niya ay 3. Tapos para makontrol lang siya, proper maintenance and monitoring lang ng equipment natin. At ma-ensure lang na gumagana siya ng ayos. Tapos yung ito naman, yung isa pang hazardous activity, yung transportation ng personnel, yung elevator, yung pagbabasa siya. Parang nakita ata ito nung pinakita yung mga videos ng PPP, yung overcrowding yun. Yung hazard niya is yung equipment failure din. At yung effect niya, pwede tayong ma-injure doon, pwede tayong mamatay, tapos pwede tayong matrap din sa ilalim ng matagal. Tapos may movie ata nun. Yan. Tapos yung likelihood ay 2, since syempre that ma-monitor yan ng maayos. Severity is 5. very catastrophic. Tapos, total risk niya ay 10. Tapos para ma-avoid siya, kailangan natin ng proper maintenance dun sa elevator. Tsaka yung compliance sa kung ano lang yung total load na pwedeng ma-accommodate ng elevator. Yun lang po. Thank you.
Okay, sige. You can just keep your shared screen. Ayun. So, you noticed, 'di ba? While you were doing the activity na yung risk control natin ay we could have a combination, 'di ba? We could have a combination of kunyari administrative or engineering controls. Can I look at the previous slide? Okay. Sige. So, tama naman yung mga minention nyo. So, you had rock failure, mine collapse, or siguro kahit yung, you could localize kahit yung slope collapse, for example. But of course, this is, itong mga sinulat ninyo would be quite different, di ba, for different underground mining methods, right? So, ayun, very important talaga ang mine geomechanics, rock mechanics pagdating sa underground mining. Yan because we're, especially since we're working in a very cramped space, so a failure of a certain portion would be quite catastrophic. Okay, so explosion, injury, or death. Well, if you're talking about injury or death, and you could also add here aside from ground control, but I think you mentioned this while you were explaining yung pagsunod sa mga protocols. Okay, sige. Can I see your next slide? Ayan. So dito, siguro mag-comment lang ako konti dun sa LHT. So the hazard is equipment failure, and the effect, siguro we are looking for something more of na magkakos talaga ng harm. Ayun, although tama naman that equipment failure would definitely cause operation delays. Ayun, it inherently siguro in itself it won't cause ayun harm doon sa mga personnel natin or whatsoever. Ayan. Pero tama naman, important naman din lahat ng mga minention ninyo dito. Ayan, okay, sige. So thank you very much sa underground mining group. Ayan, and lastly, we have the quarry mining group. Sino ang mag-share?
Si Kat po. So, yung sa group po namin, yung for the less hazardous one, we chose the first one. So, yung sa work activity, kung saan yun mahanap is nasa drilling and blasting. And yung hazard niya is noise. So, yung effect po ng noise is parang magiging less conducive po yung workplace, as well as irritation na rin sa part ng mga workers. Kasi likelihood niya is 4 because very likely naman po kasi na parang noisy yung environment sa mining, pero yung severity niya is less compared to the other ano po na nilista namin. So yung risk niya overall is 4, and yung risk control niya is the wearing of proper PPE para rin malesen yung effect ng noise sa mga workers. So for the second one, yung work activity po is nasa drilling, and yung hazard niya is dust, and its effect may be the damage to the equipments and injuries to the workers because it may lead to dust inhalation leading to lung damage. So yung likelihood niya is 3 and the severity is 2, and yung risk na in-evaluate namin is or results to 6. Tapos yung sa risk control po, this can be avoided or lessened when the mine employs drilling pattern planning properly, and as well as dust control. So sa last one, yung work activity is blasting, and yung mga hazards niya is hang fire, falling debris, and dust. So yung effect is damage rin sa equipment, pero mas prominent dito yung injury sa workers dahil sa mga falling debris and dust. So medyo similar siya sa drilling, Kasi yung injuries din dito, it may lead to ano po, parang lung damage or injury caused by the falling debris. So yung likelihood niya is 3 and yung severity is 3 and yung risk is 9. So this could be avoided or controlled when proper blasting pattern planning is employed and as well as dust control po. Yun lang po.
Ayan. Okay, sige. Thank you very much sa Quarry Group. Ayan. So if you will notice, ayan, this you could also see it actually dun sa output ng previous na groups. But in of course in each work activity, there's always an opportunity to enumerate multiple hazards, diba? So ayun, for example sa drilling or for example sa blasting, you could separate yung falling debris, you can separate yung hang fire, and then yung possible dust that is produced. Okay? Pero tama naman yung mga minention nila, ayan, particular dito sa risk control. Ayan. So sa noise, this one is something that is very much unavoidable. Okay? So PPE. And also, it can actually be also controlled, kunyari, via best practices, okay? Proper equipment maintenance. So if you have equipment that has some parts possibly na medyo maingay, okay? Just properly maintaining it could lessen a lot of the noise na maririnig during the operations. Okay? So very important ang drilling pattern, planning for both the drilling and blasting and pati ang dust control. Ayan. Okay, sige. So, thank you very much sa Quarry Group and good job sa tatlong groups. Okay, and so hopefully we had a little bit of what do you call this? Yung thought processes niyo were jogged a little bit. Sige. So, before we continue, ayan, hindi pa tayo tapos. We're actually just halfway through yung mga slides ko. Do you have any questions? Yan. Or if you think na okay kaya so far, could you give me a thumbs up? Okay, sige. Thank you for the feedback. Naisin ko lang to. Ayan. Okay. So let's continue with the second portion of our lecture for today. Although ito lang yung activity natin, the rest is will just be coming from me. So after yung high rack, let's now talk about health and safety hazards in mining operations. So these would just be some reminders relating to safety. Okay. So for us to be able to help minimize hazardous conditions, as someone who is both siguro visiting a certain site or as someone who is a worker doon sa mismong site, we have to take note of the following. So first is awareness of the work environment. Okay, awareness doon sa mga possible na dangers. We have to have in place or we have to know yung mga good accident prevention procedures and of course yung regular equipment na maintenance natin. So let's look at some of these risk control or some of these risk control measures. Okay, so what if, for example, may makita kayo na certain hazard that is beyond your authority? For example, ikaw ay intern doon sa isang specific site, and then suddenly you see that there is this that there is say kunyari may portion sa isang development opening that hasn't been barred down. Okay, so there's this piece of rock that could possibly fall, okay, or medyo loose na siya. So if this is something na hindi mo responsibility, the best thing to do is to report to your immediate supervisor on site. So most likely, if ever mangyari yun sa inyo, may mga kasama kayo na mga mentors and so on and so forth. So don't take unnecessary chances na what if hindi if you are not trained, if you're not prepared to handle that certain issue, okay, but no matter how much you would want to help, okay, I'm saying this, kunyari intern kayo, OJT kayo doon sa site. Yan, don't take unnecessary chances, don't take risky shortcuts, and of course, do not indulge in horseplay. Okay? Yan. So, kwento ko na lang din siguro that there was actually something that there was an accident. I don't remember what year this was. I think this was during the 2018 OJT. A particular student had may nahulog na bato sa kanya, and then her finger was sliced. So, and I'm not trying to scare you or anything. I'm just trying to let you know na kahit interns kayo, there's always this risk that comes with it, since we're in a quite dangerous environment. And so she had to have stitches doon sa kanyang finger, and ayun, pagbalik nila, when we started having classes in the next semester, ayun, she was still recovering from it. Ayun. So kailangan talaga na mag-ingat. All right? Ayan. So, comply with company safety policy at all times. You are responsible not just sa safety mo, but you're also responsible for the safety of others in your vicinity. So, a very good example here is fitness for work. Do not go to work if you have injuries, illnesses, or etc. And inform your supervisor of all medical conditions. So, as an intern, kung sa tingin ninyo, if you feel na may fever kayo, for example, or nanghihina kayo, you report right away to your supervisor or kung sino yung nag-mentor sa inyo na hindi mo talaga kaya today. Kahit meron kayong gustong tapusin na certain number of hours, you can always reschedule. So that has happened. Ayun, may mga kasama kami who mentioned na ayun, may sakit ngayon. So to make up for that, natulog muna sila for the day, and then they made up for it by putting in hours in the weekend. So ganon. Okay? You don't want to risk yung safety mo, and what if may mangyari and you would possibly affect yung safety ng ibang mga kasama mo din. Okay? So regarding incident and accident reporting, all injuries, accidents, incidents, and near misses must be reported no matter how minor. So very important ito, especially when you are revisiting yung hierarch ninyo, di ba? So even if it's a near miss na parang yung may certain, let me think of an example. Ayun, sige, let's say after blasting, may portion, may certain na worker who accidentally got who nearly, okay, had a portion of or a fragment fall on him, parang ganon. So nothing happened essentially, but it is a near miss. So kailangan siyang i-report kahit sobrang minor niya. Okay? Kahit walang nangyari na actual na injury. Okay? So, next, let's look at some of the surface and underground mine safety reminders. So we're just going to be quickly going through these 10 in the list. Okay, so we have mounting and dismounting vehicles, lifting heavy objects, slips, trips, and falls, working from high places, good housekeeping, being around haulage equipment, operating machinery, PPE, noise pollution, and electric hazards. All right, so let's start with number 1, which is mounting and dismounting vehicles. All right, so something that you should take note of here is use a 3-point contact. So kailangan for example, 2 of your hands and isang paa ay in contact with that vehicle when you are mounting or dismounting. So when you're getting into or getting out of any vehicle. So wag yung dalawang kamay lang or isang kamay, isang paa lang. Okay? Pwede yung dalawang paa, isang kamay, or dalawang kamay, isang paa. And always check for unsafe or loose ground. And if you notice this, na kung may unsafe na na environment, you should, for example, have it recompacted or regraded. Yan, para malesen yung risk of an injury. And then next is lifting heavy objects. So you should know how to properly lift, what do you call this? Lift certain, napaisip ako na, well, as interns kasi, you probably won't really be asked to do any heavy lifting, but just in case, no, you should be aware of the proper lifting technique. So kailangan, for example, diretso yung likod, okay. Probably some of you may have experienced yung nasa right, naggan kayo maglift. That's something that could possibly break your back. Okay. So always lift safely. And then for slips, trips, or falls, of course, always check for uneven ground. Inspect areas with cracks, areas wet from rain. So also be aware of any construction obstacles, awkward steps, and slippery conditions. And so you can see here in the figure, we have certain possible causes, diba, ng mga slips or trips. So we have rocks in certain places, we have an uneven surface, and we have yung hose. Okay? So kailangan aware talaga tayo sa surroundings natin in whichever area or environment we would be getting into. Okay, and then here working from high places. So there should be guardrails and dapat may fall protection tayo more or less. So yung guardrails, hindi siya kita. Yung guardrails ito, ayan, itong mga rails na ito, ayan, and then you have this sort of safety harness for fall protection. Ayan. So I'm guessing na well, if you would possibly visit yung mill, okay, or yung pang Minproc na area, there would be most likely certain platforms like this na that you would have to traverse or go around on. So mag-iingat din kayo kahit may mga guardrails, okay? So that's something, ayun, basically just be aware of your environment. Yan, most likely makakapag-visit naman kayo in the future ng ganon. Okay, so next we have good housekeeping. This is very important, and you would most likely see a lot of signs na clean up, clean after yourself. So all areas should be kept clean, orderly, and with necessary things in proper places. Pick up tripping hazards, clean up spills, and reduce clutter. So actually, itong mga, siguro, as we're discussing this, baka naisip nyo na internally, parang, ay, alam ko naman itong mga to. I know how to be safe. But it's really a different thing when you undergo or when you're being reminded, di ba? Kapag nire-remind ka kasi, you're able to internalize this more. Ayan, so may mention si Janice doon sa chat na yung 5S, okay? So nakalimutan ko kung actually yung ibig sabihin ng 5S, but this is something na usually it's siguro kung mag-visit kayo ng certain mines, you could see these being listed. Ano ulit yung 5S? Sorry. So I think may safety, nakalimutan ko na. Could you share, sorry, kung ano ulit ang ibig sabihin nito? Ayun, okay. So mali pala ako. Okay. Sige, so I will stop sharing the screen and then let's try to look into this. Magbukas ako ng Microsoft Edge. Okay, so let's look at the 5S principles. So this is originally Japanese origin. Ayan, ito siya. So can you see? 5S stands for the 5 steps of this methodology. Ayan. Sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. And so you could possibly see variations of this certain sign na nakapost sa mga different areas, or ayun, yung minention ni Janice doon sa chat. That is what it originally that is in its original form yan, since Japanese ang kanyang origin. Okay. Sige. So going back. All right. Yan. So mindfulness. Basically, if you're in a working area or in an environment as dangerous as mining operations. So around haulage equipment, there is always, of course, a possibility of getting struck or run over. And the larger the vehicle, the larger the blind spot. So things that are important: make yourself visible and be aware of signals. So palaging kailangan isuot yung safety vest niyo, yung reflective na vest, okay? Always make sure na nakita ka. At alamin ninyo kung nasaan yung mga blind spots ng mga vehicles na ito. So be aware of signals. So for example, pwedeng magkaroon ng signals like one what do you call this? Yung isang honk ng horn, okay? Isang sound ng horn ng vehicle. It could be, for example lang to, it could be that they are going forward. Two means that they could be going in reverse, and so on and so forth. So kailangan alam nyo rin itong mga to. For example, doon sa what do you call this? Doon sa Felix, 'di ba? Meron tayong mga LHDs and that are moving around, and we also had, of course, since underground tayo, we had our headlamps, right? So let's say that there's someone who would want to pass through a certain production area, pero may nakaharang na LHD. Ayan. So we, of course, as interns, kasama namin yung mga supervisors namin. So if we need to pass through a certain area, pinapa-back up yung mga LHD. So they would, isipin nyo na lang na may familiar naman kayo, no, doon sa mga headlamps. And kunyari, this is a lamp. So, and then meron, ayan, naka-connect lang siya doon sa isang battery sa pocket. So they would hold the lamp and then move it in this direction, kunyari, up and down. Okay, so kapag nakita yon ng LHD operator, it means na kailangan nila mag-backup, for example. And then kapag okay na, pwede na silang bumalik. They would make this circular motion, okay, so that the LHD operator would be aware na pwede na siyang dumaan ulit. Yan. So may mga ganitong signals na kung saan kailangan aware talaga tayo. Okay. And then operating machinery. So routine checks and even stationary equipment have moving parts. Ayan. So meron na pala akong nalagay na annotations here. Okay. So this one is a conveyor belt. You're already familiar with this, no? So this is basically part of the materials handling. So kahit stationary ito, marami siyang moving parts like these yung mga ibang what do you call, mga ibang gears, mga ibang rollers, for example, dito. So it's very dangerous, especially if you would, sorry for the imagery, kung sumabit kayo doon, okay? So if you will notice, kapag may mga conveyor belts na ganito, there would be guardrails, okay? But even if there are guardrails, wag kayong, of course, still be aware of your surroundings. Wag kayo rin masyadong lumapit, okay? And for operating machinery, ayan, never leave equipment unattended in a raised position. Yan, kunyari ito, what if may dumaan sa ilalim, tapos biglang magkaroon ng certain failure even though you think you've secured the equipment, okay? So if you're going to be leaving the LHD in particular, kailangan ibaba yung kanyang bucket. And then number 8, wear PPE at all times. Ayan. So what kind or what types of PPE are needed in a mining site? Ayan. So could you try to think of examples ng PPE na pwedeng gamitin? And so in any type of mining site, whether it would be surface, underground, or sa quarry or sa coal, yes. Katulad ng nalagay ni Janice sa chat, what goes up must come down. Okay, so if you can think of any PPE, ayan, so that's correct. Safety shoes, high-vis clothes, mga hard hats. Okay, so these are what we would typically have. Ayun, yung mga earplugs for hearing protection. Yan, pati yung minention ko kanina na lamp. Okay, so safety goggles, face mask, pair mga respirators. All right. So tama naman ang lahat ng mga minention ninyo. Okay, so here we have just some examples. Ayun, hard hat, safety glasses, safety gloves, safety shoes. Okay, so there would be instances where you would need yung mga steel toe na shoes. And there would be instances na pwedeng kahit yung mga rubber boots. Okay? So usually ayun, yung steel toe, these are quite these are quite heavy, but they would do the job. In hearing protection, respirators, fall protection, reflectorized vests, lamps, and self-rescue device. So yung self-rescue device, I'll be showing kung ano yung itsura niya in a little while. Ayan. So just some reminders here. Okay, ayan. Safety goggles, welding mask, face shield, dust mask, safety vest, hand protection, foot protection, protective clothing, hearing protection, and safety harness if applicable. And so that is it for the PVP. All right. So I was mentioning earlier, or habang nag-represent kayo, I mentioned that there are different types of controls doon sa risks. So dito tayo sa hierarchy of control. Okay? So ang nasa taas ng what do you call this? The largest portion of our triangle here, up here, okay? This would be our best bet, okay, to be able to avoid yung risks, okay? So first we have elimination. So itong elimination would remove the hazard from the workplace. Para it would be eliminated. Tatanggalin siya totally. Next, okay, down the line we would have substitution. So itong substitution, here we would use a different or a safer process, machine, or chemical. So yung kung ano man yung kailangan gawin, magagawa pa rin siya. We're just going to be changing it up, okay, para maging mas safe yung process natin. And then next, we have yung isolation. So as much as possible, we would like to isolate the hazard or hazardous work practice from people. Okay, so pwedeng gawin lang siya in this particular area only, in this particular workplace, para hindi ma-affect yung other areas sa labas niya. And then after that, we would have the engineering controls. So this is examples of these are installing guards on machines, okay, putting barriers around hazards. So yung paglagay ng mga guardrails, yung paglagay ng mga siguro mga safety contraptions in certain areas, that is part of the engineering control. So itong mga apat na kadidiscuss lang natin na control measures, okay, these eliminate or control the risk or the hazard. Okay, so medyo iba yung nasa yung dalawang portions, okay, that are at the bottom. We have here the administrative and the PPE. So these two rely on the person working with the hazards or risks and basically doing the right thing. So dito papasok yung mga safety rules and regulations din natin. So yung administrative controls, okay, so 'di ba kanina may mga nag-mention ng policies, mga training, certain signs to warn workers. So the hazard is very very much there. Okay, the risk is very much there, and it would now rely on the person to be able to follow yung protocol. Okay? And then lastly we have yung PPE. Yan. So it would depend on the person kung magsusuot ba siya ng proper PPE or whatnot. Ayan. So we have here, again, just an example of PPE. So imagine you would be having to wear all of these on you. Ayan. So medyo mabigat siya. Well, depending on which portion siguro or what your particular line of work would be. Yan. So yung sinasabi kong self-rescue device, it is this one. Okay, so I'll be showing a picture of that in a while. I'm sorry. Ayan, so this one is this is a sustainable report of this is Felix, okay? Ayan, so nakita ninyo na yun mukhang sila yung mga nagsa-survey. Ayan, so since you guys already took GE 11, ayan, familiar kayo sa mga equipment na to. Ayan, so meron silang mga surveying equipment dito. Ayan. And then they have their self-rescuer. Ito yung kanilang yung mask nila, okay, yung headlight or headlamp, and then rubber boots lang sila. Ayan. So, yung self-rescuer or yung self-rescue device, ganito yung itsura niya. So, let me just go to itong previous na picture na nakahang lang siya dito. So, basically, meron kayong belt. Okay, you have a belt, and then it would hang doon sa gilid. So, actually, medyo disadvantages ito sa mga, I think especially sa mga babae, because of course, yung mga hips, palagi siyang tumatama doon. So, I think a lot of us experienced bruising doon sa area. Ayan, kapag mali yung parang position niya. Ayan, so it's it's a little heavy. Hindi siya, hopefully, of course, we all hope na hindi siya kailangan gamitin. But we just leave it. We just have to bring it every time na mag-underground, just in case, diba? Because there's always a risk or na magkaroon ng fire, di ba? So itong self-rescue device, okay, or self-contained self-rescue device, pare-pareho lang naman yan. It's a portable device that provides a miner with breathable air should the surrounding atmosphere lack oxygen or become contaminated. And so just in case na magkaroon ng fire, for example, doon sa area, you could just use yung dinala ninyong self-rescue device for oxygen. So, of course, itong mga to, meron silang mga, what do you call this? Meron silang, hindi ko mahanap yung term, parang effectivity. Ayan. So, I think after a few number of years, 5 to 10 years, kailangan na silang i-replace kahit hindi sila ginagamit. Okay? Which hopefully would, of course, stay that way. And so kung may fire or explosion, kung hindi sila ma-rescue agad, or of course, if you would need to still pass through multiple areas, ayan, this could aid in keeping them safe. Ayan, kapag kapag puro contaminated and unbreathable air yung meron. Okay. And next, let's look at noise pollution. And so I think this is something that's very familiar to you guys. Ano to? Anong klaseng equipment ito from your Met E20? Yan. So it's a crusher, and specifically this is a jaw crusher. Ayan. So here, this, especially yung mga metallurgical equipment, these are quite noisy. Okay, so to be honest, when we would visit some mines, parang mas kinakailangan namin ng earplugs doon sa mga metallurgical equipment kaysa mismo doon sa site, kasi ang iingay talaga. But they and then suddenly when you go into the control room doon sa mill, bigla siyang tatahimik. Parang hindi ka na ulit sanay. But anyway, noise pollution for our first line of defense, usually here we would have the engineering controls. So, maintenance ng equipment, ayun, making sure that the equipment is running smoothly. Because of course, there's some equipment na hindi talaga natin maiwasan na may ingay talaga, like the crusher. So note areas of concern such as near crushing equipment and of course yung mga blasting areas. Yan. So kapag magkakaroon ng blasting, don't forget to wear your earplugs. And last na tayo, we are looking at electrical hazards. So know how to identify these. For example, kapag may makita kayong mga bare na wires, do not touch these. So here in the figure, you can just see some ways on how to handle electrocution. So shut off the current, okay. Get the person off the current fast. Don't touch them directly. Ayan. So use a dry rope to pull them away, or use a dry board to lift them. And you can move them, pero hindi nyo sila hahawakan directly. Okay. So that's actually the end of our lecture for today. Yan, and the end of our first lecture, yung first lecture talaga natin for EM 149. Ayan, so may mga questions ba kayo so far? And so kung sa tingin ninyo, okay na kayo. Is this lecture included in the quiz 1? Yes, it's included. Oo. So basically, yung sa quizzes natin, whatever activities we have during the week, included sila lahat. And so yung sinabi ni Sir Rara na maging lecture niya, hindi pala tomorrow, on Monday, included siya doon sa quiz number 2. Okay. Sige. So any other questions? And if you think that you are okay for now, can you give a thumbs up? Ayan. Sa tingin ko, medyo review na lang din ito sa inyo. Ayan. So no matter how careful you think you are, everyone still really needs reminding of these safety protocols. Okay, sige. So I will now stop the recording since okay na kayo. And I do not know how to stop the live recording. Sige, give me 1 minute.